Well, thank you all for joining. I'm Trip Bird, Director of New Platforms here at Markforged, and myself and the team, Laura and Charles, have been working hard on digital source for a while. With the announcement a few weeks ago, now we're interested in sharing a bit more about the details, how it works, why we think it's valuable, how customers are using it, and then answer some questions, see what we can do to help this improve the value the Digital Forge can deliver to Markforged customers. So with that, we'll get into it. So we'll cover a bit of the platform overview and some of the launch highlights after the announcement. Laura then getting into product and some of the near-term roadmap items to expect. We'll take a break for questions there. So feel free to use the Q&A feature in the chat or in the menu bar, and we'll address them then. Following up with some messaging from Charles, then a reminder on the activities, and then any Q&A left at the end. So as an overview, what is Digital Source? Digital Source is an on-demand platform for the 3D printing of OEM-certified parts when and where they're needed. Simple concept, but extraordinarily powerful. This takes the functionality of Markforged, the great ecosystem that Eiger and the materials and hardware all bring together in the Digital Forge, and allows companies to share and benefit from that value in a way that crosses company lines, crosses territories. It allows you to experience the benefits of additive in a way that scales beyond your four walls of your company. And if you think of how companies interact in the world, the way they do business is interacting with outsiders. This now allows the Markforged ecosystem to do the same thing. So with that, we have the Digital Forge, we have the fantastic hardware, industrial materials, and a smooth software experience that is industry leading. We're bringing in some new features to dramatically expand the value that this can deliver. Think of it like what Apple has done. They had fantastic user experience, great, very nicely packaged hardware, excellent software. But what they did to really bring them heads and shoulders above their competitor was the App Store. It was iTunes. It was the ability to host content created by other people, provide extraordinarily secure levels of access where things could not be reverse engineered, copied, shared on, Napster, and then provided a financial platform for them to monetize it. By sharing an upside, it incentivizes people to adopt the platform. It incentivizes creators to get on board and raises the value of the whole ecosystem. And when we do it right, we see this working as a flywheel. This is that virtuous cycle here where we get OEMs on the platform. If you think about how customer conversations go, maybe in a pre-sale cycle, the hardware is great. The parts are awesome. This is strong. It meets my dimensional accuracy requirements. This will work for my application. What else can I print? I need to build a business case. That's the hardest question to answer when we're engaging with interested prospects. We know that the results speak for themselves, but what do we print? How do we know it's good enough? Where do we get the designs? All of that is something that requires laborious engineering commitment to be able to get results. OEMs, on the other hand, they're the ones that are designing parts. They know what parts need to do. They know what they need to look like. They know if additive might be a good replacement. And in this case, it provides them an opportunity to move some of that workflow, take their IP and move it to a digital workflow that supports Markforged and allows customers to benefit from on-demand, on-location printing. Now these users with a printer on their factory floor can get, let's say, grippers from one of their OEM suppliers. They don't have to reverse engineer. They don't have to identify the application. All they have to do is put a printer on their factory floor and hit print. If this is working for them, why wouldn't it work for other suppliers? We get users then pushing interest uphill. Hey, one of our gripper manufacturers is providing an excellent experience for us. We'd like maybe our, automation company to do the same thing. As that grows, we get more printers in factories, more OEMs on the platform, then more users using this. So the more activity we have, the more value the platform can bring, and the adoption continues to grow. If we look at it from a process flow point of view, up at the top, you've got IP owners. They're creating, developing parts for additive. They're owning and validating designs. These people know that the parts designed for Markforged are good enough for their applications. They then can upload these certified parts to secure digital warehouses. This digital source now is hosting catalogs. Then these OEMs can share these catalogs with chosen end customers. These customers, it's not an open forum. It's not an open community where everyone's looking and trying to find parts. It's a B2B closed ecosystem. Myself and my suppliers, or me and my customers, working closely together to improve the workflow and provide parts with a cheaper, faster, better experience. Then these approved customers are going in, they're browsing the catalogs, they're finding the stuff that they need, buying licenses to print. They're not downloading anything. They don't have access to the CAD. They can't recreate the files, but they can purchase licenses to print them and bring them into their own digital inventory. Once they've done so, they can route the jobs either to a printer on their factory floor, right off the printer, ready to go, or maybe it's requiring a machine that they don't have, or they're retooling. They need to get 1,000 parts for the next batch. Send that out to third-party suppliers that can execute the job for them. And these third-party suppliers here, it's important to reinforce, we're looking for high value add. It's not an open forum trying to race to the bottom with the lowest cost. These are approved suppliers providing engineering products. You build a relationship, you sign your NDAs, you onboard them as a supplier. Now they're in your ecosystem and I can route jobs that way. At the end of the day, you have customers that are getting the right parts that they need without having to do the validation, design, workflows, and part OEMs are being incentivized to support this adoption. As part of this, we've worked with many beta customers, early adopters. One of them is a machine builder in Germany, BMF. Just a quick summary. We've got great case studies and more content shared in the portal, but their value here is fantastic.
Normally we print about 150 parts each week for the customers and only for spare parts. Normally our customers have to wait about 14 days to get the spare parts in their factory. And now, thanks to digital source, now we can collapse the time from 14 days to 1. Today we printed over 21,000 parts from Markforged. Can you imagine how much time we can save, how much money we can save, and how much personnel costs we can save when we use digital source?
So I love their summary there. Their job is building and deploying these blasted cabinets around the world. Spare parts are critical for the operation of them, but for BMF, it's more of a hassle. Now they can focus on their value. They can design the next generation machines. They can go find more customers. The long tail of spare parts, having to disrupt their internal production to make some spares, to stock them on the shelf, to mail them out, take 2 weeks, add cost for customers, increase customer downtime, all that can be mitigated. Now customers are printing on demand, on location, and having a better experience, while BMF now generates a dramatically higher amount of revenue. That's one customer. Markforged has got tens of thousands of machines scattered around the world. Each one of them now has the potential to be a node on this network, providing high-value solutions. 5,500 factories. Each one of these can be designing or deploying new IP around the world. We've got a big head start. There are other file sharing platforms out there in the world. There are other ways to exchange IP. This is the only one that provides the security, provides the method for monetization, and the machine feedback. How do we know that a part has been completed when we say it's done? How do we know as an OEM that this part that is being made on a machine that isn't in my facility, operated by people I don't know? How do I know that that part coming off of it is going to meet my standards? Markforged has a huge advantage here, given the cloud connectivity, our existing ecosystem, and the amount of telemetry we have to validate good certified parts on location. The benefit then, we don't have to build this from scratch. All we have to do is turn it on. Okay, so we've been public for this for a few weeks, and so far the response has been great. Huge amount of trade coverage, actually more than some of the bigger hardware releases we've had in the past. And on the hand raiser side, we are asking people to engage with us that think they've got a potential for this to fit. The response here has been fantastic. Also, some of our partners are being involved as well. They're looking to learn more, but also how can I benefit from the other functionality here? So we're happy to share more of that ahead. And as more functionality of the platform releases, it'll become even more relevant. So all of these opportunities now have the potential to continue to grow, to add other nodes to their network, and start pushing the digital forge for us. If we break down what this looks like, as we expect, the partner community is interested in learning more. Also, there are demo machines that might be idle that could be adding some more value. So offering some print services is something of interest. We also see an opportunity here for a way to engage with prospects. You've got people that are interested in getting involved in Markforged. They're evaluating 3D printers. In this future world, they could make an Eiger account. They could start to work with you to design benchmarks, to experience Eiger and start slicing, taking away some of the new scariness of how do I learn this new skill. Get them involved, and then they can route jobs to the machines in your demo center. This allows them a way to get started. If they're not in a position to outlay any capital, they can already benefit from Markforged. They can start to get parts. They can start to solve problems on their factory floor without having to make an upfront investment. We see this as an easy on-ramp. Once you get the parts in your hand and they start adding value on the factory floor, it's really tough to go to a lesser printer. Then on the customer, the prospect side. So all of these prospects that have raised their hands so far are existing Markforged users. Something that we weren't really expecting, but we see as potentially hugely valuable. The majority of them are asking for digital parts from their suppliers. Now we have a sales opportunity. Each one of these suppliers that they're bringing to us is a potential new candidate for us to engage with. Many of them don't have Markforged today, but if their customers are saying, you know what, you could do a better job, I would love to get digital parts from you instead of physical parts, that's an entryway for us to go in with a warm lead. Not that we've solicited from outbound marketing, somewhere where their customers are saying, you should really talk to them. That's going to provide us a better entry point for these and new sales opportunities. People are going to need printers. They're going to need to learn Markforged. They're going to need to start designing parts based on demand for their customers. So we see some potential pipeline coming from that on the hardware side as well. And the model's working already. So this theory, that BMF case study that we showed, they've got 6 customers of theirs scattered around that are using their machines and digital source for spare parts. The benefit is these customers have bought Markforged equipment, and they've done so without a sales cycle. We're not benchmarking. We're not trying to find new leads. This is BMF going out there and saying, hey, thank you for buying a blaster. If you'd like spare parts more efficiently with less lead time and cost, get a Markforged machine. Now these customers are in our ecosystem. We haven't had to have a protracted sales cycle. And in some cases, they've also expanded. They've got one machine from the BMF relationship, and in this downtime, they were using it for other things, realizing more value, and they've actually come out and bought another machine. Great source of new leads, great way to expand, reduce our cost of sale and reduce our sales cycle, expanding our new customer base. And then we've also got big enterprise customers that are starting to come on. Vestas, for example, working with some of their suppliers, working with some of their internal divisions or outside companies that handle maintenance logistics. This has potential to spread very rapidly. So Laura, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Trip. Hi, I'm Laura Morrison. I'm a senior product manager and the product manager for Digital Source, and I'm excited to give you a platform status update. So first, to level set, when we talk about the platform, right now it's been in a beta stage, and that's where we're getting all these great learnings. As of FormNext in November, we will have Digital Source at a general availability state. And when we go live, we'll have the ability to put vendors and buyers on the platform for sort of this left side of the diagram. So this is where vendors are able to design and upload secure digital parts to the warehouse, and their buyers are able to license those parts and print them on their own printers. What they're not able to do yet is to share with a print service provider. We'll talk more at the end about roadmap, but this we're expecting to come online in 2024 or early 2025. So that's the context to set as I start showing you some of how the software will look and feel to vendors and buyers at general availability. So we are enabling customers, in this case, a Digital Source vendor, the ability to create products and share them with buyers in a controlled way. And so you'll see some differences in the software. Once a vendor is enabled with Digital Source, they'll have this new warehouse section in their left navigation. This is their storefront where they manage products, who those products are shared with, and they can view and see orders and order status, including state of fulfillment or payment status. If you're a vendor now on the build page, you have this new button called Create Product. So as a vendor, you go about designing products the same way you always have. You look at the part file, you test it out, you finalize your slicer settings, your infill settings, your orientation. And once you're really confident that this is the right part, you can create a product. And this is actually locking down those print and material settings so that the buyer can't change them. And that's one of the critical features of Digital Source. We talked about protecting part file intellectual property. It's also about making sure that when the vendor shares the product, they know it's printed the right time, the right way every time, no matter where it's printed. And this locking of the build settings is a big part of that. Now, once you create a product, there's a lot of information that vendors can buy and they can control. So there's a product name, a price, and a description. This price is to license that product and print it one time. So it's a one-time print fee. You can also add photos if you want to highlight the product in use or after it's been built. And you can add documentation. Documentation is something that our users have asked us for a long time. You can imagine this would be a drawing that shows that the person who's printing it must measure a certain area and have it within a certain tolerance. It could also be instructions for post-processing. And by allowing us to package all this information with the build file, we're giving the vendors a lot of control of how they want to present their products to their buyers. The vendor also has control over quality requirements. So based on the criticality of their part, they can decide which of the pre- and post-processing requirements are needed by part. And I'll show at the end how this translates into the software and how the software actually controls and helps control quality automatically. So here's the view of an order page. You can see that vendors are able to see if a print has been purchased or not started, if it's been paid or unpaid, whether it's fulfilled successfully. And you can also note that there's this reprint option where they can approve a reprint. So if a buyer downstream has a problem with the print for some reason, maybe it doesn't complete successfully, maybe there's spaghetti on the tray and we think it's complete, but they send a picture back and say, hey, this didn't work, can I try again? The vendor is able to, at their own discretion, say yes. And if they say yes, the buyer is able to print again one time without additional costs. Now that the vendor has shared products, created products, shared them with customers in a controlled way through catalogs, so they can create one product to share with customer A and another product to share with customer B, the buyer now can log into the digital warehouse and browse the products that have been shared with them. You can see again, there's this warehouse section for the buyers where you can browse product catalogs or have inventory. And you can see the types of products that are shared with information about price, material, what's the name of the product and who's sharing it. As a buyer, you're able to see all the information that the vendor has specified with you: the price, the description, the beautiful product images, any documentation, quality requirements, etc. And once you know that this is the product that you want to buy, you add it to your cart. You can add multiple products to the cart at a time, and you can check out where the buyer can pay either using a credit card or a direct invoicing method. And just a reminder, what they're buying is the license to print this part one time. If they want to have multiple prints, they can add multiple items to this cart, or they can come back in a month when they need it again and order it again. Once the payment's complete, the buyer now has access to this digital file, this product, in their inventory. From their inventory, they're able to print these products. They can see the information about what they've purchased, when they've purchased it, what the cost was, and they're able to print on their own devices. As I mentioned, as we go live in November, the ability to print with a third-party print service provider is not yet available, but they are able to print at a location of their choosing as long as that printer's in their network. And they can track the print status here. When they're done, they'll get an order fulfillment completion note, and they'll be able to use the product. I mentioned I wanted to dive back into automated quality assurance. This is really important value proposition of the platform, where we're able to automate some of the processes, where we can give assurance to both the vendor and the buyer that the right part is printed the right way every time. So material assurance is always on. Because of our connected printers and how they operate today, you can't print a sliced build file with the material other than the material it's sliced for. So if it's specified to be printed on Onyx ESD, the platform will ensure that the buyer has this loaded before they're able to print. From a hardware maintenance standpoint, if the vendor chooses this as critical, the buyer won't be able to print on any hardware if that hardware isn't up to date on its maintenance schedule or doesn't have the correct up-to-date software installed. From a part quality confirmation standpoint, we're allowing vendors to require this step. And the step is about the buyer going in and saying, yes, it printed correctly. Yes, I measured what I was required to measure and it's within tolerance. We followed all post-processing instructions, and I confirm that the part is correct. Kind of another leg of this stool is serialization and serial numbers. So as part of Digital Source, we're creating a digital record, and the buyer is able to etch, Sharpie, however they want to add serial numbers to the printed product at the end, and add that number to the Digital Source database, so that if they have a problem with that part and they want to come back to the database, they can look it up by serial number, and they can figure out what was the product version, who did they buy it from, when did they buy it, what printer was used, and all this other information that they may need to trace back a problem. So the other thing to note about general availability on the 8th is that all Eiger users will log in, and they'll actually see the Markforged vendor catalog here for the first time. This is a preview of Digital Source. It's not the entire functionality. If someone wants to be a vendor and a connected buyer, they still need to go through the same sales process as we will outline in a little bit. But what it is, it's a vendor catalog filled with parts that any Eiger user can view for free and buy for free and print on their own devices. And this is a curated list of products that the Digital Source team, the Markforged team, is promoting to show off the experience in the software. So we know that people like to touch and feel products to better understand them. This is like a trial experience. And our intent is not to say, hey, Markforged has these great products, we want to make money. It's nothing like that. It's really about helping customers imagine themselves as buyers and sellers of the platform. So once they experience it, they can say, man, it would be great if I could buy products, digital products from my vendors. Or as a vendor, they can imagine, wow, this is a pretty slick experience to sell my products. How do I get started? And we will have kind of in-software guided experience as well around education to guide folks to have those learnings and aha moments. So as I mentioned, it will be in the software, so you might have customers asking about it, but it doesn't change the sales process, and it doesn't give all of the software available on day one. It's really just a preview. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of the financial model for digital source. So we have two different ways that we're allowing people to use digital source. There's the transactional model. This is what you just saw in those software screens. It's the vendor licensing the print part license to a buyer, and the buyer paying for each license and paying the vendor directly. As a result, vendors are, putting more products on the platform. Buyers are able to print more products than they ever were before. Maybe they're new to Markforged. And so what we're driving is additional value in the Digital Forge ecosystem, which means increased utilization of printers, more materials, more printer sales. There's no upfront costs in this model, which means the vendor can get started. They would only owe money if they are selling. So they would owe a percentage of the revenue that they make. So this utilization is a linked opportunity where the more that the vendors are successful, the more Markforged ecosystem is successful, more printers, more materials. And it's a good fit for the transactional business. For example, that BMF example you saw with spare parts. The second model is an enterprise subscription model. This is where the vendor, again, is sharing print part licenses, but they're not charging on a per print basis. So it's an open channel for one-directional sharing, and vendors would pay per connection. This is a really good fit when vendors and buyers already have existing contractual relationships that might not fit the transactional model. A great example is contract manufacturers. This can be applicable between two companies, or it can also work with different orgs within the same parent organization or company. And again, because we're pushing more products to be printed in more locations, we're driving overall value to the Digital Forge ecosystem, which increases the utilization of printers and materials in the field. So for future development, I started off by saying what we're releasing in November is the left half of this diagram. One of the big things we're working on for next year is allowing people to connect to the print service provider network in a secure and controlled way. And this allows, as Trip was talking about, some of the pre-sales motions where folks who want to try the printers but aren't ready to buy a printer could use a connected print service provider. So that's one of the big things that you'll see coming from the digital source team over the next year. We're super focused on listening to our customers, and we already have made some improvements and continue to make improvements based on customer feedback. And we would like to improve automated quality assurance. I mentioned this is one of the differentiators for digital source. We have a kind of a manual part quality inspection already built. We want to add more technology here with something like inspection or telemetry data that allows the platform to actually check that the printed part was as expected. And then lastly, in order to support more companies and help fit into their existing business operations, we want to add additional payment options like ACH direct debit, in addition to credit cards and direct invoicing. So I'm going to hand it back to Charles, who's going to run our halftime Q&A.
All right, everybody, you made it halfway through. The worst is yet to come. So that's me. Yeah, let's take a pause now for questions. I know a couple that have come in through the chat. You're welcome to continue typing more into the, sorry, not the chat, the Q&A. If you want to type more questions into the Q&A, we can answer those. I'm just going to go and review some of the ones that we've answered via text. One of these from Drew is inspection required to ensure part accuracy and quality. Laura, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned in the next steps, we want to build the option to have inspection be required, but really it's the vendor that sets the quality requirements. And so if the part is really critical enough that requires inspection and the vendor's not comfortable having someone print it somewhere else without inspection, then they can set that when they're creating the product details. But not all products will require that level of quality. So it is dependent on the vendor and the part that they're selling.
And Ferdinand had a question. Will all parts of a vendor be available for every customer, or will special parts be available only for customers chosen by the vendor?
Yeah, great question. So today, all of the sharing is very controlled. So there isn't actually the option to share with with everyone at once. So you use the word customers, but just to be clear, the idea of putting a part on digital source and sharing it with all Eiger users, for instance, that's not an available feature today, because we're not trying to be a B2C platform right now. We're really focused on existing relationships. And so the vendor can make connections with all of their customers, and it's up to them to decide, do they want this part to be shared with everyone or with only select customers? So they'll be able to do both on a part-by-part basis.
Yeah. That said, if you know of any of your customers or otherwise vendors out there whose parts you think would be beneficial to share to every Eiger user, right? I have probably a couple of these companies off the top of my head in North America. That might be something like McMaster Car, Masumi. It's these companies where they have a large library of parts which are mutual customers, so Markforged customers and this vendor's customers are using, those parts every day. Like the ability to be able to print that out instead of waiting for it to arrive, I think there's a huge benefit there. So while we're not allowing that up front, it's not to say that's impossible, right? Because we are doing it with the Markforged catalog, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so that's one of those features that we will add as there's demand. We're starting with these controlled relationships because we know there's a lot of value there. But definitely, as I mentioned, really open to customer feedback and ideas about how we can grow and add more value to the platform.
Yep. And yeah, this is probably reinforcing what we were saying about not being like a B2C part platform. You can do that type, like you look at Printables, Thingiverse, these kind of websites where you put a part out there and everybody can see it. What you end up getting is a bunch of versions of the same thing, stuff that's like quality is kind of questionable about. But when it becomes when you kind of lean into the one-to-one relationships, the existing customer relationships, there's a sort of a standard, right, for the vendor to upload quality parts. And there's an expectation from the buyer, the end user of that part, that it's going to be upheld to the standard of quality. So I think we have been focused on quality and trust over the last several years at Markforged, and this is no different from that. Pedro had a question. If the vendor and buyer are inside a big international organization with several plants worldwide, this works mostly in the same way, or is it a different platform? Trip, do you want to answer that? Just
Sure.
so that everybody can hear your answer.
Yep. Yeah, great question. So it really depends how this large organization is managing its Eiger instance. If everybody is on one Eiger org and they're using RBAC and different ways to manage visibility and access across the organization, they should continue to do that. However, we understand there are many instances where one large company has multiple Eiger orgs. Each plant might manage its own P&L and its own software budget. They're running different Eiger subscriptions, whatever. That one is probably the more common of the two. This functionality will be available to them. They can use it. It will be the same level of access. However, pricing and packaging will be adjusted because they are both part of the same larger organization. There will be some more information coming on that in the near future about how specifically we'll be offering it. But from a user experience point of view, from a technical capabilities point of view, it is digital source, just granted across one large multinational or, one national company with several different sites.
Cool. I think that is all the questions that we have so far. I guess we can maybe move on to messaging then. All right, everybody, my turn. Cool. So if you have seen it on Showpad, we have a Showpad hub for digital source, and we've uploaded a training as well. So if you haven't had a chance to go through that, I think it's helpful. Trip did a great job putting that together with Aaron. So it's nice to see everything in context, and it will give you more context on what you can say. Now we're going to review some of that and hopefully just get you to a point where, we're not asking you to go out and evangelize this platform on our behalf, right? We kind of said this earlier, but it's still a very new product, and it's not something that you're making margin on yet. So we want to make sure that you're armed with the capability to speak about this in the way that addresses the customer and provides and shows that this is a value to your customer. But we're not asking for you to go out and pitch this, but there's like, I think, a baseline of a few of the sentences that we use, which can help you get that point across. So let's look at this again. So what is Digital Source? Digital Source is an on-demand platform for 3D printing OEM certified parts when and where they're needed. Now, if we think about that, and like actually before I move on, this is a really useful tool, much in the way that a 3D printer is a useful tool for creating different types of parts for different types of scenarios. There are different use cases for it, and I want to outline a few of those scenarios, and there's by no means limiting, right? I think the best use case for this is probably still yet to be discovered. To summarize the 3 types of use cases that we've seen so far and which have gained some level of traction, and we'll start with the first one, which is production MRO. So this is spares and replacement parts for customers. So it's like when you think about your customer, who is an engineering organization, they are buying machines made of parts from other vendors all around, right? One manufacturing line could have hundreds, thousands of vendors, right? Each of them providing parts and machines, wear components for each of these machines. So the ability to get those spares and replacement parts and just print them at the location, at the factory, is huge, right? You're not waiting on the parts to arrive. You're not waiting for the parts to ship. You're not waiting for those parts to get made even, right? So the ability to just make them on site is a huge benefit for production MRO, MRO being maintenance and repair and overhaul. Product distribution is something that we've seen as well. And this is the ability to push new or updated parts to a network. So it may not be that B2C type of thing that we were talking about, but it could be that B2C type of thing that we were talking about. But right now, our machines are located at factories. We are mostly serving manufacturing customers. So think about the types of things that could be distributed that way. And I'll add a little more color to that later. And third, manufacturing partnerships. So this is the ability for one vendor to work with their contract manufacturers or other manufacturing partners to make sure that they have updated tools, jigs, and fixtures to ensure that their production is reliable, right? So whenever there's a new version, to be able to distribute that. It's not quite the use case of this wouldn't be a situation where they would necessarily charge for that part, right? They just want to be able to manage the part and share that in a way that keeps the most up-to-date version at the forefront. So some examples of production MRO, we're just going to go into each of these. That you could be a automotive systems integrator who is going to retool line. So a lot of that line is going to stay the same, but the programming is going to change, which means that a lot of the end effectors are going to change. So each time you're distributing those parts, there's a whole new version, a different part number. Being able to produce those on site could be really beneficial, and to keep spares for those. Spare parts for packaging equipment. So in all these assembly lines, just having, whenever some sort of like a user error happens or there are wear components that wear out, those parts are going to need to be replaced. So in packaging equipment, I think this is kind of a prime area where the level of use and the number of parts that are needed is a sweet spot for us. In warehousing, automation parts, jigs and fixtures for continuous improvement, and then offshore energy installations, like just being able to house, instead of housing a bunch of inventory for these offshore energy installations or any really type of remote place, to be able to produce those from a digital file instead of having to house inventory. These are all use cases for production MRO. In terms of product distribution, like I was saying, not exactly B2C, but imagine automotive dealer, so an automotive OEM wanting to send parts to their dealer network. Imagine Tesla needs to, I think they had something a couple of years ago where they needed to drill on, they needed like drill jigs to attach license plate holders, right? And that was a thing that could have been distributed through this. But anytime there's a change or recall, something needs to happen, or they just want net new parts to distribute, this is a way that it doesn't have to be an auto OEM, but any OEM who has a dealer network could be served this way. Consumer parts for global distributors. So you've got maybe you're a company that sells to consumers around the world, but you've got distribution centers all over. Instead of sending like warehousing and sending those parts out from one centralized location, you can have those global distributors produce them locally, which means that they're not having to pay customs, duty, import taxes. You know, fingers crossed, right? We don't know how it's going to play out for digital files, but at the moment, the case is they produce on site and then they ship from that location. Cool. And manufacturing partnerships, was kind of talking about some of these earlier, but yeah, it's those gauges, fixtures, and tools that you can send out. You can send out digitally instead of physically, right? And then that way they're produced where they're needed. They have the latest version. Anytime you hear the word AM Center of Excellence, that's maybe a keyword to latch onto. They probably have a centralized design center that builds and makes proofs of concepts of these things. They're not experts in distribution. If we can give them the tool to distribute these parts where they need them, it'll go a long way for them. Cool. So I'm going to expand on the statement a bit here. So at the top, digital source and on-demand platform for 3D printing OEM certified parts when and where they're needed. Mess it up again. What that does, so that's what it is, right? First statement is what it is. What does that do for the customer? Digital source allows suppliers and their customers to bypass conventional supply chains, eliminating the cost and hassle of physical inventory. So this is the problem statement, right? Cost and hassle of physical inventory, conventional supply chains. Digital source allows you to bypass that, right? No more like stocking parts, no more shipping parts, no more having to deal with stock outs. You just print them when you need them, thereby bypassing conventional supply chains. How does that work? Suppliers upload parts to digital source, where customers can securely license parts to print on site or through a trusted print service provider. So this statement is talking through how that works. Now you might wonder, why does it need to be secure? What are the problems that's solving? Why are you licensing parts instead of shipping them the parts? So you can kind of break that down a bit. But the secure part really is that a lot of engineering organizations today might not necessarily view their part IP as a really valuable asset to them, but that's kind of shifting, right? As manufacturing is globalized and like it's not really just about billing time anymore. Like there's a lot of time that you put in, and that is really the value of your organization. It's the time that you've put in to design, engineer those parts. So I think as we move forward, that the secure part of that and holding on to IP is going to be really important to a lot of engineering organizations. And that's why the secure and licensing parts come into play. Printing on site gives you an avenue. It gives you the shortest path to part, right? You have a printer there, you get the part the same day, the next day, right? So that's one option. And the flexibility to print through a trusted print service provider network means that you can, one, distribute anywhere you need. So as a vendor, you can distribute parts to anywhere there's a Markforged printer, which is a lot of places, but also gives you scale. It gives you the ability to scale up volume. It gives you the ability to scale up size, right? Like if a lot of sites have a Mark II, they might not have an FX20. The ability to get FX20 parts when you need them, I think is important. And then once you realize how much you've been paying for those FX20 parts, maybe you want to buy an FX20, right? So it gives people an avenue to go, like, it's not just like you go from 0 to 100 every time you want to make a capital equipment purchase. You get to try it out, demonstrate value of those parts, and then make that justification later. But it allows us to capture a lot of the value that's not captured in an initial sale. Cool. So as far as the resources that we have on hand, I just want to highlight 3 things. I mentioned this earlier, the Showpad Hub and training. If you haven't seen that, definitely take a look. There are a lot of useful assets that you can use that you can share out. It'll help you save time, especially if somebody's asking about it. Go to the Showpad Hub, check out what's available. There's some brochures and PDFs and things that you can send out. And if you want to review some of the messaging that we've talked about today, there's the training. And we have the second item is the qualification questions form, and that's also in the Showpad Hub. But when you're talking to someone and you're thinking, is this actually a good like a potential candidate for Digital Source? This will help you get there really quickly, right? So if you're wondering if they're a good fit, if you're just having this conversation and you're not really sure how to approach it, take a look at the prospect qualification form, and that'll help you engage us as well. So after you've done this qualification, it'll be a lot easier for us to engage. We can ask a lot fewer questions. And lastly, there's the customer interest form. This is where anybody now, if they want early access to Digital Source, they want more information, they can fill that out. So these are kind of the 3 main things that I wanted to remind everybody of. The URL for the customer interest form, by the way, is you see access Digital Source. It's like access-digital-source. So you'll be able to find that on the website as well. Cool. So, well, for the sake of time, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly so that we have a little more time at the end for questions. But I gave you 3 sentences earlier to describe Digital Source. We said what it is, how it benefits your customers, and then how it works. So I think that's a great high level to go into when you're at a trade show talking to somebody who doesn't quite know. You're not really sure what their interest is, but when you do know, how do you stay relevant with them? And it's funny joke, right? It's geometry dependent. It is dependent on who your customer is and who you're talking to. The talk track that you use with them and what's valuable and what information is valuable to them will depend on what is important to them. So if you know who the stakeholder is already, then you can sort of pinpoint down and narrow down some of the things some of the problems that they're trying to solve, some of the problems that they're running into on a daily basis. This helps you uncover the customer pains, and then you'll be able to communicate the relevant benefits and features. And after that, you can engage us to help with further discussion and discovery. So on this, I want to highlight this from the form. There are these are the options that you get, a customer gets when they fill out the form. Actually, and based on the submissions that we've gotten, I think a lot of you who are in the webinar today have also submitted the form. But these are things that you can do. You can share licensed parts, access digital parts, and so on, right? So I want to break those down. These are the actions that somebody in Digital Source can do. They can share parts, or they can access the parts that somebody else has shared. They can offer print services, or they can buy print services that somebody else is offering, right? So actually, it's quite simple. You can kind of put this into a grid or however you want to see it, but you're either offering something or you're buying something, and it's either parts or it's services. So I want to go through 2 of these examples and talk through how some of the words that you use can relate to those actions that somebody's doing. These are just 2 scenarios, and we're still refining where this is going to go, but it's 2 types of people we think that might reach out to you, right? These are people that you're going to be in contact with who might say, "Hey, I saw this thing about Digital Source. Like, what is it? Tell me more." And maybe an attempt at getting you a good talk track about it. So the first one might be like an enterprise AM champion, right? So the enterprise could be large or small, but it's the additive person at the company, right? They've been chartered. Their charter is to figure out where AM fits in their business. An example might be in the AM champion at an automation components provider, wondering how Digital Source can help them grow additive manufacturing at their business, how they can use it for production parts or otherwise. So this enterprise AM champion might have interest in all of those things, right? They might be interested in sharing parts, accessing parts from other providers. They might want to offer print services to their internal users, but also maybe they want to purchase print services for stuff they don't have, for equipment that they don't have, or maybe they don't have yet. So what I would say in this example is to give like a really high level overview, but which is a little bit tailored to what they do. So I would say this, right? Digital Source allows you to build a digital warehouse of AM part designs and connect people to designs, AM expertise, and equipment. And this is kind of, I'm playing into this persona, right? They've got a charter to build up really this portfolio of IP for their company, right? What parts are AM ready? How do I deploy that to our customers? So digital warehouse, I think, is maybe the key word here. It allows them to share those parts, right? You have a digital warehouse, then you can share those parts. And by connecting people, AM expertise, which is them, and equipment, which is maybe them as well, it's allowing an easier way for them to deploy AM across their business. So I'll say also share parts across an organization with IPD, which is actually, we have not talked about this yet, but we have an option for enterprise accounts who want to use this internally, or we want to share directly to customers using Digital Source, which is a way for them to apply this outward. They can print parts on site, run jobs from internal customers, or outsource securely and reliably to a trusted print service provider to address demand surges, right? So this is a kind of a holistic overview of the things that you could do with Digital Source, and that gives them a starting point. The second option here is the industrial machine builder. And this is the BMF example, right? So when you think to the BMF story, that actually, from what I've gathered so far in the early days of having the public forum out there and folks responding to our forum, a lot of people have seen that video, and that's what clicks for them, right? So if you are a small or medium-sized machine builder, maybe you're a large machine builder, and you're printing parts that are used in production today, these are some of the words that seem to work for them. So Digital Source allows you to bypass conventional supply chains by licensing approved digital part designs to customers for 3D printing on demand. The keyword here being approved, right? It is the part that you intended. It's made as the vendor has intended, and it's the part that the customer expects. So your customers get parts faster. You reduce inventory costs. So for this might not matter to the average engineer, but inventory cost is something that the person buying the equipment probably cares about, right? So that's overhead, shipping, and capital, and your business still gets paid for those parts, right? So like a lot of the folks that I've been talking to have been small bit like business owners, or like they might own P&L for a line of business, and when you talk about inventory costs there, it makes sense. So your customers get peace of mind knowing that they are using approved parts, and you get peace of mind knowing that they're printed exactly as you intended. Accessing parts from your suppliers benefits you the same way. So in reverse, the machine builder may be accessing parts from their suppliers, and putting that in there allows them to think about it in reverse and maybe unlock other applications. So these are two personas that we have some inkling on. Obviously more will surface as we mature, and hopefully sometime early next year we'll have a bit more on kind of the refined pitch for each of these personas. We'll give you a ways to kind of go after them and talk to them. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and skip this, but essentially this is a kind of highlight of the types of things that you could say regarding each of the actions and what the benefits are. And I'll we'll probably share these slides out so you'll be able to see some of this. Cool. Well, hand it off to Trip.
Okay, thank you, Charles. All right, real quick, wrap it up. So Digital Source has value here. Customers benefit from the ability to benefit from additive, faster parts, complex geometries, shorter lead times, especially without having to do all that work themselves. OEM designers benefit from improved customer experience, high margin revenue, and ability to grow their business through digital mechanisms. You're no longer competing against reverse engineering or the aftermarket. You can now match them with a better solution. And then the Markforged go-to-market team, us and our partners, we benefit from this the people in the network, these designers and customers pushing Markforged products for us. They're benefiting, they start helping us in the sales campaigns. We get new leads, we get new introductions, we drive increased utilization, we drive more consumption of materials, more printer capacity. This is something that is going to benefit us all. We want to continue to grow. And access, there's a lot of information, the case studies, one-pagers, and as Charles said, we'll have some more messaging to come, but it's all in the Showpad forum here. Go find what you need. Ask the team questions if there's anything that we can provide better for you. Lastly, we want to reinforce a few things. This is not a new product to sell. We're going to be providing updates. It's going to be evolving as we add more and more functionality. It's not something that has a price associated with it that gets recognized immediately. There will be, as we mentioned earlier, some functionality that's bundled for like that internal sharing we've mentioned. The plan will be to bundle that with existing Digital Forge subscriptions and add excess capabilities in that end of things. Best to think of all this as a new way to sell. We can now provide a higher level of value to potential Markforged users, increases utilization, and allows us from a messaging and a sales approach way to provide a new bucket of value here, new ways to benefit customers. And on direct level, there's also ways for all of us to engage new features, the IP valuation, the print services, and then engineering services. These are more areas of functionality that'll continue to be released. These are all ways that partners, Markforged, and our customers can engage and benefit. And from a sales point of view, it also allows a new approach. We can start to drive adoption without necessarily being hung up by lack of capital. And the way it works here, so as Charles mentioned, we've got that qualification document, then a form. We're looking for hand raisers out there. This is a quick overview. Self-identified hand raisers are interested in learning more, filling out the form, and it kicks over to Charles and I. We're doing some additional qualification. Does this make sense? Is it somebody we can engage with? Given where the product is today, not all the features are ready for someone to turn on right now, so we're having to prioritize. We're dividing this between who's ready to move now with what we have and who's a good fit for continuing learning, continuing engagement, for future onboarding when the features they need are live. In this tier 1 bucket, these are people who are ready to go. The way we're prioritizing them, especially people that bring customers or bring a relationship to the table. It's not that, hey, I've got an opportunity here. This makes sense for me. I'd love to get spare parts. Awesome. If you come to us and say, I'd love to get spare parts from this vendor, even better. That's the type of thing. We want people to know how they might use it, visualize who their relationships would be in the platform. If you can come to us with that, we're ready to onboard you today. We're also expanding that with some, beta evaluations as we release or develop new features. Some of these people will be exposed to some of that as well as we test and iterate. The rest of the candidates, as maybe it doesn't fit right now, or maybe we're going through a more involved evaluation process, putting them into more of a nurture stream, continuing to educate and keep in touch as we increase the benefits of the platform. So in conclusion here, we got the training, we've got additional go-to-market content and enablement material in the Showpad Hub. Qualify prospects, think about in your customer conversations who might be a good fit. If they are a good fit, fill out the interest form. With that, then the digital source team is ready to engage. We can talk, we can keep you in the loop. And if you have any other questions or maybe people that might be a good fit, but you want to hash it out with us, definitely reach out. We're here to help. We've got a customer webinar coming up at the end of the month. So more information will continue to come, more excitement, and more adoption. So thank you all for the time. No extra questions in the box here, but if there is anything, happy to stay on for a few minutes, or feel free to follow us up with us via email, and we'll continue to push out new enablement content.
We do have an email alias as well at Markforged that all three of us will see, digitalsource@markforged.com. No hyphens, no periods or anything like that. So yeah, digitalsource@markforged.com if you have any questions, or you know how to reach us.
Great, thank you all.
Thanks, take care.
All right, have a good week, y'all.